one way to reveal your true self. See all objects as empty. That's the practice. This is the practice that you're going to do throughout the day as much as you possibly can. Because if you constantly do this, if you constantly see objects as empty, you'll eventually have to experience your true non-dual self. There's no doubt about it, and I'll explain why in this video. The experience that you're having right now, you're believing yourself as this physical form, and you believe that there are things outside of you, and you believe that those things outside of you are actually separate from you, and because you believe that they're actually separate from you, you give those objects meaning. You label them. You don't try to do it in your experience. It's something that's ingrained in you. You don't question it. That's how far lost you are. And there's nothing wrong with that. You're just desiring duality. That's the reason you're experiencing duality, because you're desiring it. Even if it seems hellish of an experience, let's say you've had a very tough life, you still find a little desire in it. You might not tell yourself that. You might say, well, I don't want to experience this life. You kind of have a desire behind it. Even if it's bad, even if it's tough, even if it's difficult, you still have a slight desire to experience it, and that's why you're still experiencing it. Because only when you truly have the desire to experience your true self will you begin to change or sort of remove that entanglement that your awareness has on that dream character. You keep experiencing life like you're separate from everything else, and you're constantly doing it. You're constantly doing it. There's something deep in your subconscious mind that's giving you the belief that this is what the world actually is. And because you give into that belief, you now believe that you're inside of a world and that there is an actual world. I'm telling you that that is not the case. In truth, there is no world. There is no world because there is just awareness. That's the truth. There's just awareness. And everything that you're conscious of right now in this precise moment right now is just awareness. If that's the case, there's nothing outside of you. There's nothing outside of you. Because it's just you. And that you is just this consciousness. It's this power to project a dream. It's the power to project a dream. And now you find yourself in the dream. You find yourself in the dream, and now you're believing that there are actual objects outside of you and that you're this actual human body. That's false. That's not what's real. In other words, what you're experiencing right now is a deception. It's a trick. I don't mean this in a bad way. It's just what you're entertaining is not actually the case. You entertain something to the point that you believe in that something, and I'm telling you, when you're believing that something, it's actually not that something that you're believing in, because there are no other things but you. Every single thing that you're conscious of right now is consciousness itself. In other words, there's nothing outside of you. You're only conscious of this exact moment, and that exact moment is all that exists. You're just seeing all these different frames from your subjective experience or your point of view, and you give in to these distinction of frames that are happening so rapidly. So in other words, they're really just images. They're happening so rapidly, and you find yourself like hypnotized in this dream world that you're seeing right now. That's what's really happening. But the truth is, everything that you're seeing is really just distinct frames. They're distinct frozen frames. When I say frozen, I don't mean frozen as in a material substance. It's just it stays there as an image, as an empty image. But because you're lost in these series of unfolding frames, you now suck your attention inside a world because the frames are itself worlds. They're just events to experience. And now you're lost in this world perceiving linearity and giving into the notions of time and space. But in truth, it's really just awareness that's staying still the entire time. The movement appears to be real because your awareness is lost in it. And because it's lost in it, it now perceives itself moving through time and space. Whenever you walk through time and space, there is no actual movement because everything is staying still. So if that's the case, what does that mean for objects? What does that mean for objects? What are objects if everything is just distinct frames happening so rapidly, but now you believe that you're in an actual world and you're seeing a world? And you're seeing yourself separate from this world. And because you're seeing things this way, you believe in the existence of objects. Well, if there's just consciousness the entire time that's happening, then how can you say that there are objects? Yet here you are in your experience giving into the notion that things are actually hard and physical and have matter. And that matter is real. And because you believe it to be real, you believe that, okay, well, that matter stays over there. And when I leave that matter, if I come back, I'll find that same thing right there. That's a deception. That's not what's happening right now. That's you being hypnotized in the dream, hypnotized in all the unfolding moments and frames, now giving the experience that there is an actual world and you're inside the world. And that world is real and physical and actually something. No. You're just staring into your awareness the entire time. You're just staring into your awareness the entire time. Break that by constantly seeing objects as empty because in truth, they're just your awareness. So if you keep seeing them as something full and substantial and tangible and concrete, you keep giving into what those objects mean. And because you keep giving into what those objects mean, you now find yourself as this body loving objects and chasing after them constantly, because that's what the journey of life is. It's just constantly chasing objects. That's all it is. The truth is there is just awareness. So the constant chase of objects is inevitably leading you to understand that there's just awareness and that there was no such thing as objects. So if you want to experience your true self, start seeing objects as empty because there are no objects. Literally, there are no objects. You just see them in your awareness, and because your attention is so trapped into it, you not believe in the existence of objects. I'm telling you that that's not the case. That's not what's really true. There needs to be some way for you to experience your true self and see that what I'm saying is true. And the only way to do that is to practice something to allow your awareness to delocalize from the sense of being an individual experiencing objects. Because so long as you continue to perceive objects and entertain them as objects, entertain this notion that they're objects, then you'll keep affirming the existence of a separate self. And that's not going to allow you to experience your true nature, which is non-dual consciousness. Then start seeing them as empty because they're not real. They're not real. When you perceive them to be real, then you're sucked into the illusion of desire. You have these desires, and now you feel as if you're this person who has to chase out to get those desires fulfilled. And that means going after objects, as if those objects will satisfy me. How will they if it's just awareness? So by seeing objects as empty and seeing objects as really something that's really appearing in your awareness, you don't give in to those desires as much. They no longer control you. Everyone is being controlled by desire. The practice is to not be controlled by it, because if you're not controlled by it, then you start to realize your true self. So stop giving this notion to your subconscious mind that those are actual objects, because they're not. They're really just appearing in your awareness. When you perform any type of self-inquiry, any type of spiritual practice, eventually what's going to happen, if you start, like for instance, if you're seeing objects as empty, then eventually it's not going to seem physical anymore in your experience. That physical experience you have, and you touch something and you touch it and it's hard, it's physical, that experience is going to be completely gone when you start going inward, when you start taking consciousness and removing the entanglement it has on this form. It's only stuck on this form because you're giving in to the notions that there are actual objects outside of you. And that experience itself will keep perpetuating the illusion. In other words, it keeps the projection generating. That's what karma is. It's just a projection that keeps on generating, and because you're giving into it, it stays projecting. That's literally what's happening. You're only keeping the existence of a separate self or duality alive because you're entertaining the fact that there are actual objects outside of you when there's not. So see them as empty. When you take your awareness and you remove that entanglement from practice, you no longer see this world as something physical. You start seeing it as some energy, as some energy. If that's the case, and if this is what science is also telling us, if that's the case, then why are you giving meaning to objects? Why are you believing that there are actual objects when it's really just made up of energy? If something is made up of energy, are there actual objects? Ask yourself that question. Are there actual objects if everything is made up of energy? Everyone knows that this whole world is made up of energy. That's what science is saying now too. Everyone knows that. Then why is everyone still entertaining this notion that there are actual objects when it's all just energy? It's more subtle. It's more dreamlike, if anything. If it's more dreamlike than anything, then how can you believe in some objective world and that there's actual objects? So start seeing them as empty because they're not actual objects. Start seeing them as empty. You keep doing this, you gradually see that there's just the self. There's just you. There's just consciousness. There's just awareness, however you want to call it. If you practice this as a sadhana, a spiritual practice, and you keep doing this over and over and over again, eventually you're not going to see this world as energy anymore. You're going to see it as something mental. And then you're going to start perceiving so much bliss out of your mind, that it eventually leads you to understand or to experience everything being actually empty, because everything is actually empty, because everything is really just appearing in your awareness, and that awareness is all that exists. To experience that consciously and to know in your experience that this is just awareness only, you have to completely see things empty, because at that point there is no objects, there is no anything, there is just you. And that's what's shining in the experience. This understanding of this knowing, not an understanding because it's not something conceptual, this knowing that you are all that exists. You no longer perceive anything outside of you anymore. There's no thoughts, everything is completely empty, and there is just consciousness shining. That's the experience. If you want to experience that, then obviously you have to start looking at things as if they're empty. Because if you're still entertaining this notion that they're actual objects, then you're going to keep the projecting generating. The karma is just going to keep unfolding. Start seeing them as empty. This doesn't mean that you're rejecting certain things. This doesn't mean that, okay, I'm not going to eat something that I really like. You're still going to do that. You're not stopping that from happening. You're going to keep going on with life and keep interacting with objects, because that's how you're going to start. You're going to begin that practice just like that, because that's what you're experiencing. You're perceiving everything separate from you. So keep doing that. You just have to start to understand what it is that you're really doing. If you're giving into this desire of seeing something that you want, something that you want to have, then you're going to keep entertaining this notion that you're separate from what you're trying to get. Keep the experience running, but remove the notion that that is an actual object. Start to see them as empty. Start to see them as invisible. Start to see them as something that's not really there. You have to really keep this knowledge firm in your mind and put it in your back pocket and just remember, at least start remembering that you shouldn't be giving into the notion that they're actual objects. If you keep that understanding firm, then desires will naturally fade away because you're no longer craving the objects because you see that they're actually not real objects. So you obviously start to stop craving them. When you no longer crave objects, it's not like you can't engage with the object or you can't continue to eat something, you can't continue to get something. It doesn't mean that stops because in truth, you're just staring into your own awareness. So what's there to repress if everything that you're conscious of right now is just awareness? There's nothing to repress because at the end of the day, it's just awareness. So whatever it is that appears to be happening, just let it keep unfolding, but stop giving into the notion that there is an actual object outside of you. Because if you continue to see that that object is actually matter from your perception, and you keep believing that way, you're going to keep receiving it that way, and you're going to keep entertaining the illusion that way. And because you're doing that, you're just stuck. You're lost in a dream of unfolding events. Start to see those objects as if they're actually empty. You'll naturally give up desires and you'll naturally lose the craving for them. You'll still continue interacting with them, but at some point, it's no longer going to feel like you're interacting with objects because you start to see that, okay, well, things are really energetic. Okay, things are really mental. You keep going all the way and you're going to finally expose your non dual self, seeing that it was just awareness the entire time. In other words, you literally turned the appearance, or I should say, you literally turned the belief and the hard coded conditioning and notion that there were many different things, and you turn it into one singular stream of unbroken knowledge that says, there is just you. And there is just you the entire time. If that's the truth as it stands right now, then you have to at least start seeing objects as empty. If you keep embodying this practice, you will eventually reveal your true self because there's nowhere left for awareness to go. You only believe yourself to be separate from all these objects because you keep entertaining it that way. You keep entertaining life that way. You have to break that conditioning, break that habit. If you disagree with my message, it only means that you're lost in that individual form and you're entertaining this notion of objects, and you completely forgotten who it is that you truly are, that you want to debate people and be argumentative of others who believe that there is just consciousness when you're believing the exact opposite, and the exact opposite is absolutely false. It's false. Start to see objects as if they're actually empty, and then you will literally have no other choice but to experience who it is that you truly are. Because when you start rendering the projection and this notion that you're this body being projected and that there's other objects outside of you, and you keep believing in that, you're going to keep sustaining the experience of duality. That's what happens. You keep perceiving it that way, you'll keep living it that way. You have to break that conditioning and start to see objects as if they were empty, and you'll start to see that that conditioning that's driving your experience to experience life in a dualistic way, it begins to dissolve. You see it in your own experience, it begins to dissolve. So if you're still have all these emotions and still have these desires for all these different things, and that's obvious proof that you're not taking your attention and delocalizing from the physical body, the physical form. It just means that it's just stuck. So you have to perform some type of practice. If you keep performing the practice of seeing objects as empty, then where else left is your attention going to go? Eventually, it has to just merge and see that it's really just awareness the entire time. And that if it's just awareness the entire time, then obviously there are no such thing as objects. Obviously. How can there be objects now if everything is just completely formless? Because it's really just you shining, and you're completely detached or untouched by any of the phenomena that you're perceiving in duality. That includes pain. That includes anything that's conceivable for a human body, right? If your awareness, that experience is completely gone, it's vanished. You still see the appearance of the body and all these different objects, but you know it's really just one the entire time, and you see it as one. That's the case, then you have to at least see objects as if they're empty, because if you keep believing it differently, then obviously you're going to keep perceiving it differently, and you're going to keep entertaining this notion that you're this physical body that's distinct from everything else. So keep seeing objects as empty. Literally everything that you do, when you wake up, during the day, at night, keep seeing them as empty. You'll start to see that they're really just a dream. You'll start to see that everything is really just a dream. That's why I always say it's like when you go into inquiry, into depths of inquiry, and you go into any depths of spiritual practice, you eventually see that everything is made of a dream substance. It's made up of a dream substance. If you're not seeing it as a dream substance and you're instead seeing it as some physical substance, then it just means you're being deceived. It just means that you're just desiring to be in the projection. There's nothing really wrong with your experience right now, even if it's flawed. It's just knowing that the truth of what you're experiencing is really just consciousness. And it's either you're experiencing consciousness consciously, or it's being obstructed by a false experience, which we call avidya in Vedanta. It's just ignorance. That's all. It's just ignorance of who it is that you truly are, and now you're experiencing something different. Constantly wake up, see that everything is empty. See that what you are looking at is not an actual object. Start seeing it as something appearing in your consciousness. And when you start perceiving it as if it's something appearing in consciousness, you're not going to label the object. You're not going to give meaning to the object. You're not going to give it specific values. You're not going to say, okay, I like this object more than that object. And so you're getting rid of this notion of differentiation. You're just seeing everything as something that's really unified, because that's what happens when you start seeing objects as empty. You're no longer giving it meaning. You're no longer conceptualizing what it is that you're seeing and what it is that you're perceiving. The less you do this, you're really just surrendering. You're surrendering. And see, when you see objects as empty, you're eventually going to surrender, because you're no longer giving into this notion that you're a person that's going out and chasing objects, which is what the entire journey of life is. It's really just this person, this individual that believes it's chasing objects, and it's continuously happening. Every single lifetime, every single dream that you're having, all the distinct chain of dreams that you've been experiencing life after life, is really just there because you're still entertaining the notion that you're separate from everything else. And so, in order to break that chain of dreams and see that it's really just you the entire time, you have to at least see objects as empty. Because no matter what type of spiritual practice you do, eventually you will see them as empty. So this is why we're practicing this, because you inevitably have to see everything as empty to realize who it is that you truly are. Because when you realize who it is that you truly are, when you're in that direct experience, you actually see things as empty because there is just you. You can't say that there's something else other than you. If there's no something else, then how can there be something that's not empty? How can there be something that's not empty if it's just you the entire time? See, there's no longer distinctions. So you can't say that there's something. You can't say that there's anything. You're even giving up those concepts, so you start to see that there's just you. So there's no need to bring up anything or everything or one or none of that, because there's just you. You just are. So constantly see things as empty. In your experience, you're not rejecting them, you're not suppressing them, you're not trying to move away from them. So, because in truth, how can you move away from your own awareness? You can't. You can only move away from something because you still believe that you're this person that's separate from that something. And I'm saying that there is just awareness. So how could you even reject something like that if there's just you the entire time? So you're not rejecting anything, you're seeing through it. And you're starting off by at least remembering or telling yourself that that object right there that I actually love and I desire is actually not that object. It doesn't exist as such. Why? Because it's made up of energy. Why? Because it's mental. Why? Because it's this imagination that's made up of some dream substance. Well, when you get to that point, you eventually see that the truth of all of that was really just consciousness the entire time. And so, even right now, when you believed yourself to be this body, separate from everything else, there was just consciousness through that experience as well. It was always consciousness. See, so the problem is you're not trying to get away from something. You're just seeing through that something because ultimately what you're seeing through is your own self. So start to see objects as if they're empty. The more you do this, the more you will have no choice but to experience your true self. So constantly do it every single second of the day, as much as you possibly can. That's the practice. You're doing this as much as you possibly can till you start to see through those objects. You start to see through them. And when that happens, you know that there's nothing to reject, there's nothing to repress, because you're seeing through it. Doesn't matter what you're doing, you're seeing through it. And the more you see through it, the more you have to give up this notion that there's a you seeing through it. Even that notion becomes gone. That's what it really means to jump into nirvikalpa samadhi, is to completely give up this experience of you being a separate self. So obviously the ego is gone. There is no ego, there's just the self. So you could say that you kill the ego, you could say that you dissolve the ego, fine. But even those words are meaningless because in truth, there was no ego. So what was there to actually dissolve? That's what it really means to dissolve the ego. You dissolve it so much that you can't even bring up this notion that there is an ego and pretend that there is a you and something else that you perceive to be different. Keep seeing objects as empty. If you keep seeing objects as empty, then everything in your awareness that you've been entertaining as physical, as something outside of you, is no longer such experience. The experience is completely gone. It's rendered non-existent. It's no longer there. It doesn't exist for your experience. You see that there is just you. You see that there is just you. So obviously, if you give up this notion of objects and that they're actual things, then obviously awareness has no choice but to just shine as its own awareness, because it's only the existence or the notion of you believing that there are objects sustaining the experience. And so the experience keeps on generating. It keeps on unfolding. You see yourself stuck in these constant constant unfoldment of distinct frames. That experience of duality eventually dissolves and you start to see that there is just you the entire time. So if there was just you the entire time, then really nothing has been dissolved. There was just you. So at least start seeing objects as if they're actually empty. If you start seeing them as something that's actually empty, then you don't give in to the desires as much. You start to give up this notion that there are actual objects, because in truth, everything was just happening in your awareness, the awareness that you're holding right now, the awareness that you're holding that's being conscious of me talking to you when you're really only staring into your own reflection. You're just staring into your own awareness. If that's the case, then see those objects as not actual objects. See them as if they were empty.